I get asked by coaches every day what sort of courses they should take or what sort of certifications that they need in order to serve their clients at the highest level. My advice to them is actually that they don't need more courses and they don't need education. And that might sound silly because I own an education company. And if you're watching this, you probably know that Coach's Corner University is my education platform. But what most coaches need is actually soft skills. It's actually the ability to see, hear, and understand the person that's in front of them so that they can better communicate the knowledge that they already have. And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're new to the channel, my name is Paul Oneid. I'm the lead educator at Coach's Corner University and the head coach at Master Athletic Performance. I've been a top 10 all-time powerlifter in 2 different weight classes. I've been a mediocre bodybuilder, now turned terrible endurance athlete. I've seen it, I've done it, got the scars to prove it, and I'm here to teach you a little bit about what I think makes good coaches great. Now, I'm a firm believer that the program that you write for a client can be the most evidence-based, scientifically accurate piece of intellectual property you've ever created and yield absolutely zero results. That's because it's not what the person in front of you needs. You have to coach the person, not the program. In today's lecture, we're going to talk about psychology and the things that every coach needs to know in order to serve people at the highest level. The goal isn't to become a therapist, but to read the person in front of you, meet them with real empathy, and help to move them forward, and also to catch your own blind spots along the way. That last one gets skipped a lot, and it's where a lot of us quietly get in our own way. The thing I keep coming back to is that the longer you coach, the more you realize the limiter is almost never the sets and reps or the macros. Your program is actually just a piece of paper, might as well be a Kleenex. Without the read, the conversation, and the trust behind it, that program literally is meaningless. The barrier to progress is usually what the client thinks, believes, and tells themselves. So if we can't work with the psychology, our best programming stalls. And that's the whole reason for this video. I firmly believe that the physiology only matters as much as the psychology allows. Obviously, in the long run, you're going to be better off having the most knowledge possible. But without the ability to communicate and the soft skills to read the person and speak directly to them, you're going to be missing the boat and you actually won't be able to apply a lot of the knowledge that you have. So here's where we're going to go. 5 moves. Read the person, lead with empathy, move them forward, the mindsets involved, and checking your own biases. It's important to be able to spot the thoughts and patterns driving the behavior, meet them where they are, make them feel seen, and then ask them, don't push them, and prove their story wrong. Then reinforce those positive behaviors. Then we're going to look at the mindsets that make all of this fit together. And then we're going to learn how to, check our own biases with regards to the distortions and then bring those into the room. How we show up often will dictate how the client shows up. First, I want to set this boundary very clearly. You are not a therapist. You don't diagnose, and you don't purposefully dig into someone's childhood. But more than likely, the better you get at this, it'll probably come up. We can learn a ton from therapists because good coaching mirrors what they do. Think about it using the example of a strength athlete. Coaching a strength athlete is structured into training cycles. It's time limited. We've got an off season and a comp prep. It's problem focused and goal oriented. And it's built on a shared relationship between 2 people. Essentially, that's the same skeleton as CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. For those unfamiliar with CBT, it's the gold standard for psychological intervention. For a reason, it works. Which brings me to the one line that I want you to take from this whole video. I mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. Coach the person, not the program. The value doesn't come from that piece of paper. The value comes from you, the coach, and how you adapt it to the individual. To read someone, it actually helps to know how thinking works, and there are 3 levels under each behavior. There's conscious thought, which is the easy stuff. I want to bench today. I'll eat the chicken and rice. It has full awareness and it's deliberate. Then there are automatic thoughts. Fast, unconscious, no awareness at all. Something like, oh, I always miss my 3rd attempt. That thought's going to fire before the person even chooses it. That's where the distortions live. These are typically rooted in some sort of historical evidence and can ruminate quite heavily in people's minds. And underneath all of those are schemas, your core beliefs and personal rules, built over a whole life, shaped by your environment and the people who raised you. You're not rewriting someone's schemas, you're just learning to hear the automatic thought so you can work with it. These schemas are the stories that we tell ourselves about the automatic thoughts, and those feed into the way we see ourselves within the world. And you might think this is a bit esoteric, but it really does matter. Two athletes can have the same exact things happen and react in completely opposite ways. Let's say both pick up an injury mid-prep. One of them thinks, "Oh man, I got hurt. I might not be built for this." That person might get discouraged and then disappears. Maybe even they quit the sport. Yeah, I've seen it many times over the years. The other athlete, "Hey, setbacks are where I get tougher." Then they use that setback to refocus and push harder. Maybe they take control of the rehab process and end up coming back stronger and have a great end to their prep. Same event, different beliefs, opposite outcome. Once you see that model, you stop reaching to the event and you start listening to the belief. That right there is the skill of reading people. It'll take some time, especially if it's a client who's new to you, but you need to begin to create awareness to the subtle cues they give you in their language, especially in the face of hardships. This is actually one of the reasons why I build in specific challenging scenarios into coaching. It helps to expedite the learning process. So let's talk about what you're actually listening for. And I want to say this up front. Every client has disordered thinking. You have disordered thinking. It doesn't mean they need therapy or you need therapy, but I am a big advocate for therapy. So let's talk about what you're actually listening for. And I want to be upfront about this. Every client has disordered thinking. So do you and I. It doesn't mean they need therapy, although I personally am a big advocate for it and will likely maintain my participation in monthly therapy appointments for the rest of my life. These distortions mean that we're human. Our job is to just notice the patterns and appropriately intervene. These are the big ones, and you'll hear them constantly once you're tuned in. We've got all or nothing. I can't do the 20-minute walk you programmed, so I'll just do nothing. There's disqualifying the positive. Well, I went 8 for 9, and that one miss ruined the day. Then there's disqualifying the positive. Oh man, I went 8 for 9, and that one miss just ruined my day. Kind of silly. Overgeneralizing. Oh man, this is always happening to me, or this never happens to me. Now these are the big distortions that you'll hear in pretty much every client, and you'll hear them constantly once you're tuned in. First, we've got all or nothing. The person who says, "Oh, I can't do the 20-minute walk, so I'll just do nothing." Then we have disqualifying the positive, where regardless of what happens, they pick out the one thing that didn't go their way, and that completely ruins the experience. Like the client who went 8 for 9, and that one miss completely ruined their day. Then we have overgeneralizing, which I see very often. It's those all or nothing statements, or the always or never statements, like, "I always blow my third attempt." Then there's the mental filter, where they lock into one bad thing and delete all the context around it. There's catastrophizing, making a mountain out of a molehill. Mind reading, where they decide they know what you think without ever asking. And personalization, taking on all the blame or dodging all the blame. You don't need to memorize this list, you just need to start hearing those in your check-ins, and when you can name the pattern out loud, calmly, with no judgment, you give the client a handle on it. Reading also means knowing where someone actually is. This comes from motivational interviewing and the stages of change. So in the pre-contemplation phase, they're considering change, but not actually, willing to do anything about it. In the contemplation change, they know they need to change, but not quite sure how to do it. In the preparation phase, that's when they know they need to change, they know the steps they need to take, and they're getting ready to do it. The action phase is where they actually first step in and do something. And then the maintenance phase is when that new action becomes more of a habit. You almost never get a client in the pre-contemplation phase because someone who doesn't think they need to change isn't hiring a coach. Most people show up already in preparation. They see the value, they just need help getting the action and staying there. That's your biggest window to build belief and self-efficacy. When someone relapses or slips back into an old pattern, treat it as the learning phase. Find the trigger, reset, and keep walking them forward. Handle the relapse as data, and you turn it into the thing that makes them more consistent over time. The last piece about reading, the relationship gets built in tiny moments, not grand gestures. I call them moments of impact. Little windows where a client does the right thing, and you catch it, and you reinforce it right away. Like when a lifter quietly nails their nutrition all week, and you notice it and say so. Or after a rough patch, they string together some strong sessions and you name that transition. Or maybe they auto-regulate a set to protect quality and you back them up on the call. Those are the I see you moments. when they actually realize that you're paying attention. A quick example here is in a recent meet debrief, before I gave any notes at all, I just asked one of my lifters, "Hey, how do you feel about the meet?" His read on his own squat was sharper than half the notes that I took. And asking first is how you catch that moment instead of taking it right over. That level of autonomy that you can provide someone enhances the win that they perceive and builds buy-in over time. You might be thinking like, hey, if I give them too much ownership, they're not going to need me. No, if you give them ownership, they will realize that you are leading them towards their autonomy. Autonomy supportive coaching is one of the most impactful coaching strategies that you can possibly take, because wins that were accomplished through personal ownership hit way harder. Which takes us to the heart of it, empathy. And I want to be clear about what empathy actually is. It's the thing that makes everything you do land. Treat it as the core of the job, not a nicety. I also want to highlight here that there is a difference between being empathetic and enabling behavior. You can absolutely be empathetic and understanding of some situations, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't challenge them. Hold up a mirror and put pressure on the client to step up and create change. Sometimes they might not be ready for it, and that judgment is yours. But as a coach, it's your job to elicit change. It's not to coddle someone for fear that they might crumble. And hey, if they take offense to it and a confrontation ensues, that's your opportunity to explain your rationale and ask them, how would you have preferred that I handled this situation in the future so I can better serve you? Remember that you're on their team, and they should know that. A client wrote back to me long ago after I'd sent her an honest read on where she was. I told her that the way that she talks about herself was coming from a place of shame. I brought into light some details about what she had shared in her past and the way she had been treated, explaining that her words and actions were in alignment with the way she had been treated in the past, not the person she was trying to become. That can be a really hard conversation to have, especially when this person has been taught over and over by historical evidence that they are a certain way. But her response to me was, hey, that just made me cry because I actually feel seen for the first time. And to me, that's the job. It's to make people feel like you see them for who they are and who they're trying to become with your help. AI can write your programs, it can write your macros, and now with some of the new functionality, it can even write your check-ins. The one thing it can't reach is exactly what I just described. One sentence to a real person at the exact right second that lets them exhale. Like, I could feel through the conversation with that client that her shoulders sunk like 2 inches. And if your coaching can be screenshotted and reproduced, you're really competing with apps. If it makes someone feel seen, now you're playing a different game. That type of coaching is what AI will never replace. This is the visual that I love to use when picturing the coaching relationship. Is you're not pulling the client along from the front. You're not walking in front of the client, pulling them along. You're also not behind them, pushing them forward. You're actually walking side by side with a hand on the small of their back, guiding them. Meet them where they are and walk them to where they need to be. Now, remember what I said about enabling earlier? Empathy and accountability are not the same thing. Empathy and holding a standard go together. The standard is actually the kindest thing you can offer to someone who's trying. A few lines that I use: hard conversations are useless unless they create change. So say the hard thing and then hand the person 2 things they can actually do this week. Honesty without a next step is just venting. So when someone's drowning, maybe they're faltering, and they're bracing for you to lecture them, I'll just chime in. Hey, I have no expectations for you other than effort. That comment just drops the shame and keeps the bar in the same place. And I'll move the conversation off the scale and onto the choices, because choices dictate your results. And the choices are the part that they control. All right, so now you've read the person, you've met them with empathy. Now, how do you actually create movement? And this is where motivational interviewing and autonomy supportive coaching really shine, because the biggest thing we have to resist is what's called the writing reflex, which we'll talk about later. The urge to jump in and fix everything the second you spot it feels helpful, but it actually kills the relationship and it removes all ownership from the client. There's a simple frame or a rule. Resist the writing reflex. Like, as a rule, you do not want to fix their problems. You want to understand their motivation, their why, not yours. Do not project your motivations or your commitment onto your client. Listen with empathy and talk less. The majority of your conversations with clients should be spent listening and asking questions. Lastly, you want to empower the client as a real collaborator. In the conversation itself, lean on some open-ended questions, affirm their choices and actions, reflect on it with them, and then summarize after the fact. Bringing back that meat debrief I mentioned earlier, 4 words before I said anything. How do you feel about it? He already knew where his squat broke down, and my job was just to confirm it and hand him the tools. It was not to be performative or to wow him with my expertise. Ask the question and then refine. The other thing we need to do is validate. Beliefs are real. And if something sounds silly to you, it is actually real for that client. And rarely are you going to talk someone out of a belief. You actually just out evidence it. You implement something that allows them to stack some wins in the opposite direction. If a client swears that they always miss heavy lifts, don't argue. Run the experiment. Give them more heavy exposures and let the training log tell the truth. That's a behavior experiment. You're helping them prove their own distortion wrong. Then, when they do, you have to reinforce what you see and what you want more of. If you call attention to them bracing really well, you're going to get more really good bracing. Spotlight the good and don't sit around hammering the bad. Then, when you can, hand over the pen to them as they earn it. Give them autonomy, maybe tier it in. As their mastery grows, give them more ownership. Honestly, the best programming idea in one of my lifter's recent blocks was his own. He owns that plan in a way he never would have if I just handed him the solution. And the more autonomy someone has over their process, like I mentioned before, the more they'll be invested in the process and the better the results will be, both subjectively and objectively. And I've seen it time and time again, in real time. Now, you've read the person, you've met them with empathy, and you've got the tools to move them forward. But the tools only work if the stance underneath them is right. So let's talk about the mindsets that hold the whole thing together. So the loop you're going to run through with every client is going to be read, empathize, challenge, reinforce, evaluate. Then back to the top. And the mindsets underneath it is that the client is the hero of their own story and you're the guide, not the savior. You always pair challenge with encouragement, both sides of the coin. And every single time you do this, you coach the person first, the athlete second. There is a human running that program, and that person needs to be your focus. Honestly, if you take anything away from this talk, aside from coach the person, not the program, it's to actually take a look in the mirror and realize that you need to check your own biases. Everything I said about client distortions applies to us too. And sometimes the most dangerous biases in the room are ours. So let's be honest. The writing reflex again. Fixing everything on site, that builds dependence instead of autonomy. The other is projecting your goals onto the client. I actually had a guy quit once because he thought I wanted him to have 6-pack abs. I actually didn't, but clearly the way I was coaching made him feel like he wasn't doing enough and he was falling short. That was my picture in his head, not his goal. The next is mind reading, which you might recognize from the distortions we discussed earlier. Deciding a client failed because you didn't do your job properly, when maybe they just were dealing with something you didn't see. Always ask before you assume, because in that situation, had you asked if you did enough for that client, they may have told you yes. And honestly, that practice is great in every aspect of your life, not just coaching, because when you assume, you only make an ass out of you and me. My mom taught me that one. Catastrophizing loss is another one, where a client doesn't achieve an outcome you were aiming for and you think they're going to fire you. So you dote on them because the scarcity mindset takes the wheel. In this business, you're going to lose some clients and you're not going to nail it every time. If you're doing your best and the client knows that, they aren't going anywhere, even if you fail. And if you do lose people, do so professionally, take ownership over what's yours, and chances are they'll either still refer you to people or return in the future. Oftentimes, it's both. 2 tools that we should have here. One is self-editing. Take the time to strip your own frustration out of a message before you hit send. The other is just honesty. I'll tell you straight, I've fallen short many times in a variety of different self-imposed reasons. I coach people through that exact pattern that I've fallen victim to all the time. Naming your own biases and owning your shortcomings is the standard I hold myself to, and it's the one I'm asking you to hold yourself to as well. So, you don't have to be a therapist to read a person, understand the thought behind the behavior, and coach the human first. Do that, and your program finally gets to do its job. When you meet them where they are, walk with them to where they need to be, That's coaching in a nutshell, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the X's and O's of programming or nutrition. It doesn't require additional certifications, and it doesn't require more courses and money spent. The physiology only matters as much as the psychology allows. If this got you thinking, drop your questions in the comments. The more I hear from you about what's landing, the better I can make this stuff. So please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.